Welcome back. A House of Commons committee was looking for answers today on the massive cost overruns at the National Firearms Registry. In a sometimes raucous hearing, the committee heard from the Justice Minister and his officials, along with the Auditor General. You may recall Sheila Fraser had earlier reported the registry could cost as much as $1 billion after original estimates pegged the cost of registering long guns in this country at just $2 million a year. She also found the government had kept the true cost of the registry from Parliament. In a moment, I'll speak with 4 members of the Public Accounts Committee, but first, here's part of the question and answer session at committee today.
My first question is for the Justice Minister. The Auditor General's report was very, very clear. She said, the Auditor General said, Parliament was kept in the dark. Why the cover-up?
You will understand that, from my standpoint, I tend to disagree with the way the question is put forward. I've read the report of the Auditor General. I've read as well all the recommendations. And there's always two sides of the coin. We respect the recommendations, and I said as well before Christmas, and I said it many times in the House and outside the House as well. We accept all the recommendations of the Auditor General. That's why we've decided to table a plan of action last Friday, a good plan of action, which is talking essentially about more transparency, more accountability as well. But when you look at the way that department have to report, we've seized all the occasion that we have, based on our obligation to report, whether to Parliament through parliamentary committees. My predecessor and I appear at parliamentary committees, once a year. And as well, if you look at the estimates, you look at the supplementary estimates, you look at the report on plan and priorities, you look at question period as well.
Mr. Chairman, can I just zero in on this very important point? The Speaker...
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. He's asked a question. I'm allowed to answer.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Cauchon, he doesn't have much time. I pointed out that he is limited.
Mr. Chair, point of order. He made a very, very serious allegation. I think it's only fair to allow the ministers to answer. And if we wanted to set the tone of this meeting to keep it civilized, I think it would be fair to allow the minister to answer the member.
Okay, everybody check their guns. Thank you. Yeah, very good point, Mr. Mahoney. Mr. Harb, and I would ask the minister to be brief. There are many people who like to ask questions, and the clock is running. So you respect the fact that the members only have a limited time. Mr. Brightcrest.
Yes, I wanted to zero in on what the minister just mentioned. The Speaker and Parliament couldn't even find an item in the Justice Department's estimates. And if the minister has that information, I wish he would show it to me. You cannot find that item defined. In fact, the Auditor General made it quite clear it wasn't there. So would you please tell me where that item is clearly in those estimates that you were just talking about?
Thank you. I should explain a little bit about our reporting. I should say at the outset that the Department believed that it was reporting in compliance with the government's framework for reporting to Parliament. In hindsight, could we have reported more information? Perhaps we should have, but hindsight is 20/20.
A description of the project, the various departments and agencies that were involved in it, the total expenditures to date and planned expenditures for future years, major milestones and progress reports and other things. So as a major Crown project, which the firearms program was, this reporting should have been in the departmental performance report.
That's my point. Parliament was kept in the dark. Now, originally, the gun registry was supposed to only cost $2 million to taxpayers. By next year, it will have exploded to about $1 billion, 500 times over budget. How can this possibly happen that you go 500 times over budget?
We have to go back to the very beginning. As I said in my opening statement today, when you look at the complexity of the program today, it happened that obviously it wasn't possible to deliver the programs for that amount of money.
Most of my questions, if I might, to the Auditor General. A statement was made just here a few moments ago about how this program has ballooned, I think the term was, from $2 million
to $1 billion. Before I came in here, I heard one of our colleagues in the House from the opposite side, from the opposition, quoting you, in fact, saying that the Auditor General has stated that the Firearms Registry program has wasted $1 billion. Do you have any concerns about people making these kind of statements and attributing them to you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have obviously never said that the government wasted $1 billion. We have not done an audit of the benefits, if you will, or the efficiency and the economy of the effectiveness of the program. We only looked at the cost to date and how that had been reported. And how
did that cost to date rise to $1 billion?
The cost to date has not risen to $1 million. The projected costs over time are projected to be more than $1 billion.
Okay, so your report states that the total cost to date is $688 million, I believe.
Well, if I might just correct, that is the cost being reported by the department. Our audit is saying that we cannot give any assurance on that cost number because there are costs that are not included in it.
Right. When they reported that cost, did they tell you exactly what it was for? The allegations here are that it's $1 billion for the registry program alone. All of us were aghast when we heard those statements. Is the $688 million that has been spent to date, first of all, over how many years is that, and what exactly does it cover? And how much is the registration program specifically within that figure?
Well, one of the difficulties, just to start, Mr. Chair, that I mentioned at the beginning is that we had asked the department to prepare the cost based on activities, which would separate out things like registry, computer program, advertising, whatever, and they were unable to give us that statement. I believe they may have pulled some information since then, so the department might be able to answer that better than I. We were given a listing of expenses by nature of expense, so travel, salaries, how much actually went to the registry.
Do you have that figure?
We have the costs of the Firearms Center, and I believe that's essentially it, but we do not have the costs of the registry per se.
Well, Mr. Hessian has done some work, and I'm sure you've seen that report that was prepared. And a couple of things. First of all, in his overall findings, he states that to really judge the cost of this, you need a baseline. And he uses, and this is on page 1 of his report, and he says the first baseline forecast suggesting that the CFP would cost taxpayers only about $2 million in excess of the fee income it would generate was plainly based on flawed assumptions. Do you agree with that?
That is the contention of the department.
Do you agree with that?
Well, I would say yes, given subsequent events.
And for more on the gun registry story and the testimony heard at committee today, I'm joined by 4 members of the Public Accounts Committee. With me here in the studio, a Liberal MP, Mac Harb. Up in the foyer of the House of Commons is the chair of the committee, John Williams. And with him, as you can see in the foyer, is Judy Washley-Solis, who's the committee member representing the NDP. And Gerald Keddy is with me in the studio, and he is a progressive Conservative member of Parliament. Thank you all for being with us. And let me just, there was a good back and forth in that committee today. And let me just throw this question out, because I think it's what Canadians want to know. After watching those who did the testimony today or following this story, are we any closer after today's session to knowing how and why the cost of the gun registry ballooned so high? Who wants to start?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We're not a bit closer. The minister came there and his deputy with very well concise, practiced lines. They intended to blame the cost overruns on the registry, on the fact that the provinces didn't tie in, on the fact that they really hadn't done anything this complex before, and they really didn't quite know what they were doing, and costs just seemed to escalate and escalate and escalate. But there's another issue at stake here, and that's who's responsible.
I would agree. I mean, I don't think this government is yet prepared to accept the full report of the Auditor General, who was very thorough and very clear about both the mismanagement of government funds, but also in terms of accountability to Parliament. And it seemed to me today that the government continued to be in full denial, and it hardly creates the chance in the future for honest and transparent accounting to Parliament and to Canadians.
Well, of course, you know, that we have to take a look at the Auditor General's report, which is very factual. It states it out in a clear, succinct manner about the problems. And what did the minister say? It's a complex program. Well, let me tell you, the province of Ontario registers more drivers and more vehicles than there are gun owners and gun licenses. And why they can do it quite simply, easily, efficiently. And this government has to spend $1 billion, be halfway there, and no sign of getting the job done properly. You know, this idea that it's a complex program is just a smoke and mirrors and whitewash by the minister.
Mr. Harb, it's time for you to weigh in on behalf of the government now. The Auditor General did say again today that she can't guarantee that the cost won't rise above even the $1 billion that it's projected to hit. So there. Even with all the stuff we've heard about the gun registry, she says that there's no guarantees that it still won't go above that. What about the answers to some of those questions? And is it simply an issue of pointing the finger at the technology and the unwillingness of the provinces to participate?
Well, first let start with the fact that there is a problem with the gun registry, that the Auditor General is absolutely right in outlining and stating the fact that there is a major problem with the gun registries. But also for the record, state that the minister, on behalf of the government, both in writing and as well as verbally, indicated that he fully agreed with the recommendation of the Auditor General without any reservation. And in fact, he tabled an action plan on last Friday in the House. And as part of that action plan, he will deal with every single recommendation that came from the Auditor General. There are two issues here which is important to note, that there are those who would wanted to cancel the gun registry altogether, and those who are really legitimately concerned about the overrun. And I think it's important for my colleague in the Alliance in particular to state whether or not they support the gun registry, or is it just they use this overrun as an excuse in order to bring down the gun registry as a whole?
We don't bring the gun registry down unless Parliament doesn't vote it any more cash. And as you know, we don't have the votes. We have to rely on the support of some backbench Liberals. And if we get enough of them, then Parliament will deny the gun registry the cash, and then it will fall. But that wasn't the debate today. The debate today was the incompetence and mismanagement of the government, who couldn't figure out how a $2 million program became a $1 billion program and rising. That was the issue.
But the agenda of the Alliance is, in fact, to bring down the gun control. The agenda of the Alliance is to go against the wishes of 75%.
Far be it from me to stick up for the Alliance, but quite honestly, the minister and the entire Liberal government has done a very good job at confusing the issue of gun control and the gun registry, and they're not the same thing at all. What the minister came to committee today and said was that he'd brought in an action plan, that he was going to fix the registry, and it would all be done in the next month. Well, it took 10 years to get this bad. How are we going to fix it in a month? And his idea of fixing it is to move it over to the Solicitor General's department. Well, there's something wrong.
Well, given the bungling that has happened, the onus, I beg to differ with Matt Card, but the onus is on the government to show that, in fact, the benefits of the gun registry are in line with their overall objectives in terms of gun control and public safety. And by having made such a mess of it, and then on top of it not coming clean and admitting to the problem, but instead playing hide and seek and then not coming, confessing fully to the problems, it allows for this program to be held under a cloud. And really, it's the jury's out until the government comes forward with a full accounting and a full indication of what the pros and cons are and what the benefits are.
Well, as I said, the minister have clearly stated on behalf of the government that he's totally in support of what the Auditor General have said. He put in place an action plan that the Auditor General have welcomed today, And of course, she wanted to work with the department, and the minister said so. He will work with the Auditor General.
But you know, there was still.
What else could he say?
Let's go back to the point. I wanted to ask the Canadian Alliance representative: is his party for gun control or against? Their objective at the end of the day is to bring down the legislation, to bring down the system altogether.
Okay, let me just hang on, Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, just a second.
Government.
For the record, as a rule, I'll try to ask the questions, but I'll give you that. I'll give you that one, and then I get to ask one.
Well,
the
Alliance wants good, responsible, efficient, competent government that delivers what Canadians want. And this is not what they want when even the Chief of Police of Toronto, the second most important police officer in the country, says this thing isn't working.
Well, but Mr. Harb, it is true that some of your own backbench MPs are leading, in many ways, the campaign to freeze any more money to the gun registry till it can show that it's a reasonable expenditure, that the costs are being controlled. So it's not just members of the opposition parties that are troubled by what's happening.
Of course, we're not denying the fact that there are those who are for and those who are against, but the reality of it, we should give in to the fact that the majority of Canadians support the gun control legislation. They support the gun control. And my colleague mentioned the Chief of Police of Toronto, but I also mentioned the police forces across the country who have clearly stated that they wanted the system to continue, who have clearly stated, notwithstanding the difficulty that we have in it, we should not kill the program. The program is working. More people are using it.
And you shouldn't mix
it's saving lives.
Doesn't work in Toronto.
You shouldn't mix up gun control and registration. They're two different things. And I mean, sooner or later, you guys have to admit this. You ask the Alliance what their opinion is, but sooner or later you have to come to grips with the fact that, yes, Canadians have embraced gun control. We're fully well aware of that. They haven't embraced a bureaucratic, expensive regime of long gun registration that nobody asked for and, quite frankly, nobody wants.
Okay, Judy, let me just, watch Lisa, let me just jump in here for a second. I want to get the sense of their... it doesn't sound like the committee, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but it doesn't sound like the committee will get any further to knowing. There were questions asked today, but who asked the question? And I think it may have come from one of the Alliance representatives on the committee. It just said, look, was there a cover-up, I think was the question.
That's right.
Well, did you get any closer to that answer today? I mean, is the answer that it's computer systems and, to some degree, a certain mismanagement trying to figure out and launch a brand new program? But is there any suggestion in what you heard today that there, in fact, is some sort of cover-up, that the money's gone somewhere maybe it wasn't supposed to go?
Well, the problem is the government wouldn't acknowledge its own mismanagement of this fund. I mean, they're still arguing over the numbers and still trying to deflect attention away from fiscal mismanagement and talk about the gun control issue. This isn't about gun control. It's about this government botching the management of a program and now not coming to grips with it. So I think, in fact, if it's not a cover-up, it sure smells like planned...
like keeping Parliament in the dark?
Absolutely. We've been kept in the dark, and it feels like there's some deception going on.
That's not at all. I would suggest that not the case at all. The minister have clearly stated that he agreed with the recommendation of the Auditor General, that there were major problems with the system and we have to fix it. But let me say this. When the Auditor General was asked a question today whether there was a cover-up, she clearly stated that there was no cover-up. In fact, the Department of Justice, when they got their allocation, they got their allocation for the whole department, and within those allocations, they put money toward the gun registry. So, and she clearly stated there was no cover-up whatsoever.
She clearly stated she had to stop her audit because she didn't have enough information.
Well, and that's why the government have asked Pete Marwick in order to come in, KPMG, in order to come in and have a look at, to find out whether or not anybody have broken the law, or if there is a huge mismanagement within the system. And the audit found,
finish up quickly, because then I want to ask the final question.
The audit found that by and large, there's nobody have broken any rules.
Okay, let's move on, because the question then becomes, okay, what do Canadians get for whatever the price tag is at the end of the day? It doesn't sound like, under this government, it doesn't sound like the gun registry is about to go anywhere. The question is, will the cost be controlled? And what we're hearing is, it's expected to cost by the year 2008, is it $67 million? Yes. When it's finally running the way it's supposed to run, it's $67 million a year, up from, we should say, the $2 million a year was supposed to cost, having been paid for in theory by the registration fees. But at $67 million a year, is a national gun registry a good value for Canadians?
Well, there's two simple answers there. One, the Canadians are going to get a program that doesn't work because handguns have been registered since 1935 or thereby. We had that shooting by a young girl in Mississauga just a month or so ago by an unregistered gun that's supposed to have been registered 75 years ago. And the other thing they're going to get is a bill of $67 million a year on top of the billion for something that doesn't work.
There's Mr. Keddy, then
there's absolutely nothing that's foolproof. There are a number of issues here that we need to look at. The gun control issue in particular is just this red herring that the government keeps throwing out. Your question was, are we going to get value for dollar? We're not. There's no way. Take that $67 million and spend it on more police enforcement, spend it on programs to help battered women, spend it on enforcing peace bonds, and you will get protection for society.
Judy Washer-Lisa, at least for $67 million a year by the year 2008, do we get a system that Canadians will want and will work for them?
Well, based on the government's record to date, I'd say there are legitimate questions to be raised by Canadians, and it's now the onus is on the government to actually show the benefits of the registry in terms of gun control and public safety. With this kind of these kinds of mismanagement issues swirling about and the government's failure to deal with the issue head-on, Canadians are left with more questions than answers, and I'm afraid that they've done a great disservice to this whole area, and whether or not it can recoup public confidence and restore public confidence, I'm not sure until they come clean and are upfront and honest about what actually happened and how they're going to fix the problem in the future.
It's sort of 3-1 here, so we'll give Mr. Harb the last word.
Gun control is about safety. It's about protecting innocent citizens. Gun control is about ensuring that guns do not fall into the right hand. Police forces have been using the gun control registry for many years now and have been working. There are problems. The minister have admitted that. We take full responsibility for this. Yes, it's terrible, but we have to move on. We have an action plan that the Auditor General seem to be satisfied with. We have to monitor closely, and of course Parliament need to know.
Okay, thank you all for being here, and it's a story my political antenna tells me that we will continue to hear about and to follow. Thank you all.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.